Hello, and welcome to the Assessment Alchemist, the podcast where we transform the daunting world of assessments into a journey of empowerment and achievement for educators and students alike. I'm Tina Wiles, your guide in this quest to conquer test anxiety and unlock the secrets of effective test preparation. In each episode, we'll mix the perfect blend of expert insights, practical strategies, and inspiring stories, all designed to help you turn test taking into a positive, enriching experience for your students. Whether you're a teacher, a school counselor, or an educational enthusiast, you're in the right place to create alchemy in learning and assessment. So let's dive into today's topic and discover how we can turn educational challenges into opportunities for growth and success. Welcome to the Assessment Alchemist. And I am so glad that we have Monica Burns from Class Tech Tips, or Dr. Monica Burns, right? As our guest today on the podcast. So, Monica, go ahead and
You
introduce
bet. Well,
yourself,
so
please.
excited to be here with you today. My name is Monica Burns. I'm an EdTech and curriculum consultant, a former New York City public school teacher, and I've been out of the classroom for a bit now, leading professional development for educators and creating resources to help make EdTech easier on my blog, classtechtips.com, and my Easy EdTech podcast.
Awesome. So, was it when you were in the classroom that you started doing all the
Yeah,
ed
so
tech
I
stuff?
went one to one with iPads with my students pretty early on in that movement or availability to even have tablets like that in a classroom setting. We were not the first classroom in the world or in New York, right, to go one to one with iPads, but we were pretty early on. And that's really when I started thinking about all things creativity and curation of resources, but also what formative assessment in particular would look like with the use of digital tools.
That's awesome. And is that like how did you go from like being in the classroom to where you're at now? Like
Yeah, so
what's
I
your
was kind of
journey?
in a 7-year itch situation in my school where, I loved working with the students that I was working with. I'm still very close with many of my colleagues from the school that I taught at, but I was looking for a change. And at the same time, I was starting to write and talk about education technology integration. I had a few opportunities to do some more speaking and sharing about it. And I thought, let me try this out, right? Let me see what it looks like for me to be an educator outside of the classroom, right? Supporting educators in a large variety of roles. I was able to work with some organizations and schools where I still got to spend time in the classroom, which was really important to me to have that face to face time, but then also had the flexibility to write and share in different ways. And so it's been a journey. I travel around to different schools and organizations. This afternoon, I'm hosting a webinar for a group of educators. So I love just the hybrid of it all to be able to share in a variety of formats and to connect with educators in different spaces, either showing up to their school or district, or I was in Florida for a conference last week, or over Zoom or any of the platforms where we're able to talk and try things out and just connect with a different level of ease and frequency.
Oh my gosh, it's amazing. And you're kind of all over the place with like schools, districts, online, in person, and then you have
Mhm.
the blog and the and the podcasts. I can't even imagine
Well,
what your
it's
calendar looks
definitely
like.
a process, and it's been a process to figure out what it is that I can do, right? What I can fit within a week, what I want to be able to do within a week, and then of course, from an organizational standpoint, having just the systems and the structure in place to make sure things feel not just doable, but that they're moving right in the right direction. And even
Yeah,
when
yeah.
thinking about that from running a business or kind of organizing the professional development that I do, it's really also front of mind for the work I do with educators. I've kind of always talked about ways to streamline things, to make templates, to use graphic organizers, right? To look at those sort of routines that we have around something like formative assessment. And really over the past year, that's kind of connected to the AI of it all, right? How can we use generative AI, right, to
I'm just
save
gonna
time,
say.
to help us streamline tasks, to help us create those templates or get ideas for how to differentiate instruction. And so, I've been sharing, and I was, as I mentioned, I just at this conference last week, and one of the things I shared with the groups there, I did a formative assessment session and I did an AI session, which is always fun, right? But just this idea that I'm always happy to have a conversation on school policy or what to do when it comes to, right, originality reports and those sort of things. But, that's not really my lane, right? My lane is really on how educators can leverage this technology for instructional planning. It's something I've always talked about in some capacity. And I'm really excited that this proliferation of generative AI tools can really have an impact in that area of an educator's day to day.
Absolutely. I am a huge, huge fan of AI. And I do know that some educators are not the
Mhm.
biggest fan, right? Of like, but I truly think it's just like
Yeah.
having a
Mhm.
calculator, right? It's a tool that that you need to know how to
Yep.
use properly, right? And as educators, there's so many things. It's mind blowing when you
Yeah,
start looking at it.
absolutely. Mhm.
So yeah. So are you finding that a lot of people are very receptive to using the teachers are
It's been
to
really
using AI?
interesting, leading workshops, especially, virtually is one thing, but when I'm in person with a group and I can kind of see the body language or the hesitation or the questions or I bet this person wants to ask this and maybe they wouldn't if we were on Zoom, but I can have a one-on-one conversation while we're trying things out. I keep telling people to feel your feelings, right, about this, right? There's a lot happening. I definitely don't want to enter a space with a level of toxic positivity of this is amazing and going to, all the things, right? I do think that we can hold a few different things to be true at the same time. Understanding the unknowns, the bias, the hallucinations, right? All the things that are worthy of heavy consideration, even from adult use cases, let alone potential student use cases down the line. But that being said, with the workshops that I've been doing this past year, it's really been amazing to see people in different roles who will come up after and say, I did not think this was for me. I teach first grade. I teach physical education. I do this. Like, I did not think that this workshop I was sitting in this morning at my school or district was going to be for me, but I can't believe all the things that I can do. Or people who are calling me over, to their table as they're trying something out and saying, look what we just did, or look what we figured out, or this is going to save us so much time. And I think, this has been a really interesting year for me as a facilitator and an observer, right, of those moments for people as they're starting to make the connections. Because just like so many things, you don't know what you don't know, right? I don't know things I don't know, right? And it's just a matter of spending some
Absolutely.
time seeing what's possible and then understanding how it might transfer, or maybe not sure just yet, but having that kind of spidey sense ready to have a moment, a week from now when you're like, oh, that would be a thing I could do, right, in this generative AI space, whether it's for developing discussion questions for a group of 10th graders that connects back to the standards and something they're interested in learning more about, right? Or it is helping you figure out what to do with the four seemingly random ingredients in your refrigerator and you're looking for some extra help, right? So there's just so many ways to use this type of technology.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you said you did stuff with AI
So
and
yeah, so I
assessments?
done a few different things where, within kind of the general session that I do, one of the categories I often talk about is activity ideas, and the other is differentiation, right? So all kind of connecting back to this concept of gathering formative assessment data and then acting right on that information. And there's a handful of things that you can do, right? So say you do a traditional assessment and then you realize that a student is really struggling to make a connection or just isn't interested or excited about what you're doing, right? You might ask a chatbot to make a connection between adding fractions and basketball, right? Or tell me, right, why someone should care about photosynthesis. And then you have this new explanation, right, that you could give to a group of students that just helps them make a connection. Or you could ask for an analogy between, right, one topic and a high interest topic for students. And so there's a lot that you can do that would fall into the I've gathered this information, I need to act on it. So that act on it category. But then there's tools beyond just a chatbot like ChatGPT or Claude. There's Diffit, there's Conquer, Magic School has gotten a lot of traction this year too, where you can say, I'm teaching this, help me create questions I can use to check for understanding.
That's phenomenal to be able to think like, and even with so like your photosynthesis example, if you could like actually put into the chat bot, can you please explain photosynthesis in terms of
Right.
a basketball game
Yeah.
or something, right? Like, yeah, it'll come up with everything where you realizing that you could use that as a tool is the
Right,
connection
and
that you
that's the
need to
thing
make.
too, is like, it's not gonna
Right?
just do it for you magically. I think sometimes we think about AI as like taking over, right? And so for this, like we are
Right.
really, at least for now, in the driver's seat of all of this. And so if we can say, my students are really understanding this particular topic. Maybe we're talking about recycling, and you ask it to write a scene where two characters talk about recycling and one convinces the other why it's important. And now you have this reader's theater style piece that two students could act out, right, or read just between the two of them. And it's going to bring a concept to life in a way that wouldn't necessarily be possible or easily as possible as in the past.
Right, and an amazing thing for you to use to make the classroom more engaging, and all you had to do was
Exactly.
know that's what you needed to put into the yeah, into the AI. So you mentioned a couple different, AIs that you recommend for a classroom. The, is when you're talking about coming up with assessments, is there, one that you find that's been better to
Yeah, there's
use
a
or
few, and there are some that have very overlapping features. So I think that's important to note too. Like I talk a lot about technology tools when working with schools and districts, or especially like at a big conference where there's a huge mix of people who are in, right, the group with me. And I always like to remind them to take a look at what's already in your tool belt, because that thing that you've been using might also do what we're talking about today, right? And it's definitely true of generative AI, where that's increasingly becoming built into popular familiar tools. But if you're looking for a standalone, one that I like a lot is Conquer, Conker. I did some work with like their parent company in the past, but this is a completely different tool that they've released this past year. And what it does is it asks you what types of questions you want. My favorite is the read and respond. So it gives you a passage. You can put in the topic, you can add in standards, you name it, and then you can say what language you want the output to be and what grade level you're targeting. And of course, when it comes to grade level, we all know that that can be a little tricky, right? So you might need to move around a little bit to get the right type of thing for the group. And so it'll generate questions for you with a reading passage, short, and then a question. And it'll even tell you how it sourced the information. I think it uses the language like double check this with a Google search or validate this with a Google search, right? And then you can export it in a few different ways, but I love that you can export it as a Google form. So then you can share that form with students. And once it's in form mode, you can go in and make any changes you want to. So you're like, you know what, that vocabulary word is not going to resonate with me. In our part of the country, we don't say soda, we say pop, right? Or whatever it is that you want to do to make, right,
yeah,
the
yeah.
change. And so that's something where just speeding up a process, still needing an educator in the driver's seat. Right now, you have this thought partner, this collaborator, and really this virtual assistant to help you throughout that creation process.
It
And that's just one example. There's a handful of others, but I think that kind of illustrates what's possible within this space.
no, absolutely. I mean, it's almost it's
Mhm.
scary in a way because the possibilities are endless. But like you said, like it's it's scary that they're endless, but
Yeah,
we're also in the driver's seat right
right.
now. Right? And it's yeah, important to know that. So I know like it's
Mhm.
changing on a daily basis almost with like what's out there. And even you said like some of the tools that you use already are starting to incorporate these features. And even like my browser yesterday came up
Yeah,
with like it updated and it has all these new AI features
right.
within the
Yeah,
browser that
and
I
that's
use.
something too that I think is
Um,
important for people to be mindful of. I've been doing this Tuesday series with a group of educators, and so I like check in with them every Tuesday for this cohort we're doing. And so on earlier this week, when I was checking in with them, I kind of gave them a couple like news items of like things that happened in the past week, right? That might be interesting to them. And I've run a membership site for about 5 years now that I call the Easy EdTech Club, where I do like masterclass and fun stuff. But then earlier last spring, I said, let me set up a smaller group, my like AI for education membership. We've got like 100 or so people in there. And for that one, I do monthly updates where I'm like, here's what's new this month. Because I do think that it can be really overwhelming with just this flood of like all the AI information, and then this at least gives them like a here's what I think you should actually care about, like as that with my educator hat on, like these are the
yeah,
updates or the news items that I think are noteworthy for you, because I know through all my newsletters, like all the things I get, like there's marketing info, there's like more global concerns, or there's other things that are interesting. But when it comes to like curating that, I think that's been a new part of my role this past year, kind of in service of those memberships and some of the professional development that I do, is just making sure people have information that is relevant to what we're actually doing. Because you're right, there is this almost fire
right,
hose of updates and new stuff, and it can feel really overwhelming, even if you are someone who would label yourself as like technology confident, right? It's a lot happening quickly.
right. Yeah, and there's, um, like you said, there's so much crossover, so then it's like, "Okay, well, if I know these 3 sites have this capability, how do I know which one is actually the best or
Yeah.
the most accurate," or right? And so one of the things I was gonna ask was about, like, if you're just starting to get into the
Mhm.
AI space as an educator, what you would recommend. And so I really like that you have this AI for
Mhm.
educators membership, right? So do you have are those like just individual
Yeah, it's
teachers that
really
join
just,
this?
and it's funny because I felt this way 15 years ago, right, in my school, where I loved everyone I worked, like I have such wonderful colleagues, but I felt like I was kind of in my own bubble when it came to the ed tech stuff, right? I didn't really have a lot of people to talk to
Yeah,
about that. I think that's changed a lot, right, in terms of more people having capacity for those conversations. But I feel like we're almost there again with the AI of it, where you might be someone in your school who's really excited about this, but no one else wants to talk about it, right? Or no one else is interested. And it can feel really isolating when
yeah,
you're curious, you want to bounce ideas off someone, you want to get new ideas. But, if someone's looking to get started with this, I know I've got like a bunch of prompts and stuff that they can download for free right from my website. But even something like simple, like going straight to a chatbot, like just go to ChatGPT, just go to Claude, just go to Bard, choose one of them, and try putting in your instructions or your questions. Like, make me a list of open ended questions I can ask kids to take a position on this topic, right? And like all of a sudden, you're now getting your wheels spinning, and maybe you end up using a more AI and education specific tool, or education tool that's powered with AI down the line. But at least you're starting to build that muscle of understanding how to leverage this type of technology.
yeah. So it's almost like
Yeah.
you just need to
Mhm,
dive in.
mhm.
And wherever you dive in is
Exactly.
the right place
Yeah.
for you to
And even
be.
if it's something silly,
Yeah,
right? If
and
it's
just
something
kind of like
silly, like make me a
yeah,
recipe with these 3 ingredients, help me plan a weekend trip with my family that's within a 2-hour drive, like whatever it is, even just getting in there and saying, write
yeah.
a riddle that I can use to, invite people to a barbecue at my house next weekend, like play around with it. Yeah.
That's
Mhm.
awesome. Yeah. Yeah, I used it last week for, one of my sons we had to do something with a summer internship that he had been offered. And so I, like, was like, "Please give me a letter written in the language of a
Mhm.
college student that refers to this and this and this about a
Oh, yeah.
summer internship." And then obviously but it gives
Exactly,
you a
yeah.
starting point, right? So, like, we went through and edited the whole thing and changed some things around, but instead of like, "Oh my gosh, I
Right.
don't even know where to
And yeah,
begin,"
and I think,
right?
I'm
Yeah.
always like funny about putting numbers on things, like, because oftentimes people ask about like screen time or this or that. And it's, for most things, it's just like the quality use, right, of all of these tools. But for something like that, I think it is, almost safe to say, like, this could get you 70 or 80% of the way there. It's not going to get you 100% in most
Yeah.
cases, right? Unless you're looking for a simple, like, list of vocabulary words and all 10 of them are perfect before you share them with your fifth graders, right? Like, more likely than not, you're going to substitute
Right.
two or three of them out, right? Or you're going to tweak that letter
Ex
before you send it to families, right? So,
ex
like, but that starting point,
exactly.
like you mentioned, is huge. We've all been there with a email that we're just, how do I respond to this? Or where do I even start,
Yeah. Yeah.
And that can absolutely
Yeah.
give you a little bit of a push, some confidence, some structure to work with.
And like you said, I mean, we were both, yeah, you were in the
Mhm.
classroom, I was in the classroom as well. And if someone came up to me and told me, "I have something that can get you like 80% of the way there with
Right.
something you're trying to do with this magic," right? You would be like, "Oh my gosh, thank you." Right? Like, even if I have 10 minutes back of my day,
Oh
that's
my
going to make a
gosh,
big
right? Yeah,
difference.
it's just, and it's that sort
Yeah.
of thing
Yeah.
too. Again, like I said, I in the past have been so hesitant to put numbers on things, but I feel, pretty safe to say, like, this could save you a few hours a week. Maybe it's just 2 hours,
Yeah.
but just
I would
2
agree.
hours, like, that's massive, right? And if you are thoughtful about bringing this into your workflow, I don't think that it's you save 2 hours and now you can do 2 hours of new stuff. It's like, no, you save your 2 hours and now you can reallocate your time to something totally different. It's not about adding on to our to-do list because we are doing a few things faster, but just really working smarter, not harder.
Exactly. When it comes to assessment and like
Mhm.
anxiety around it, one case that I've been able to use, like a chat bot is, I have one of my sons actually has his diagnosed generalized
Mhm.
anxiety disorder, right? And writing and having to do anything with writing essays is
Yeah.
like debilitating for him. Like, yeah, he can't like it's like
Uh-huh.
he can't get started. And I told him, I'm like, go into ChatGPT and just put, give me 10 ideas on how to start this essay. And he was like, but that's cheating. I'm like, it's not writing the essay for you, but if it can give you that first
Yeah.
step of then you can write the whole thing. So are there ways that you could think of that teachers might be able to help their students with the AI when it comes to like
Yeah.
assessments or
I
getting over
love
like
that
anxiety
example,
stuff?
right? Of just setting up someone for success. And we might do it ourselves as teachers by giving someone some sentence starters, right? To help them get started with their writing. We might ask someone to talk it out to us and then say, okay, that's fantastic. Now go get started with your writing, right? Like, we use these support strategies all the time, right? As classroom educators in ways that don't even use technology. So I think there's a massive argument to make for all of us, right, including students, particularly right in an upper elementary or secondary level, where having that first pass, right, or start to say, I really love this period of history. What are some unexpected topics I can research for my research paper, right? Like, that's giving you a start, right? Or what are some things I should include if I'm going to do a project on this, right? Like, and that's going to help you, right? With your research, with your feedback loops, with all of that. So I think it's important to mention, right, in the context of this question, that some of these tools, like a ChatGPT, for example, are not like COPA compliant, right? Or are not designed with student use cases in mind. For some of them, it's kind of like Instagram, where if you're over 13, you're allowed to start an account, but that's really like a family decision of what's comfortable, in a school or district wouldn't necessarily advocate, right, for a student who's 14, right, to sign up for a social media platform for all
Right.
of the reasons that, with the COPA compliance and other pieces. So I say that as a caveat. I think that's going to evolve, right, in terms of what's out there and available for students, but particularly, and I
Yeah.
just on Monday night or Tuesday night of this week, yeah, Tuesday of this week, I did a session
Oh,
with
wow.
families. So I don't typically have families as an audience, but I was working with a school in Connecticut in person, and we did a follow up with families to kind of say, like, what are we talking about when we brought Monica to come in to talk about AI? Like, what should they be thinking about? And one thing that I recommended to them was this, idea of, right, a joint media engagement is a research terminology we would use to say, like, sitting next to each other and playing a game and talking about what's happening on the screen, right? Like, that's the same sort of thing that can happen
Yeah.
here. It might be a family account for a chatbot, and you're sitting side by side and doing just like what you said. Let's get some ideas. Let's get our wheels spinning. What's out there? What's something we're not thinking of? And what I like about that is that you are co-learning what's happening in the space. You
Yeah.
are guiding that conversation, even if it is a little out of your control, right, in terms of responses. And then you're both having some chat about what it means to be transparent, right, about your use cases, how this doesn't have to be a sneaky technology, right, that nobody knows about or that we're using, right, in nefarious ways. And it also puts both you and a child, or you and a student, right, depending on the use case, right, in a seat where you are creating or interacting with this content, right, with that creator hat on, so that when you're consuming this content,
Yeah.
like, this video looks funny, or that voice doesn't sound just right, or I don't know who wrote this. This doesn't sound like the voice of a person writing this, right? Then you become really smarter consumers of content, which is another aspect that, is adjacent to our conversation today, right? Of what it means to be smart
Oh,
about information
absolutely.
literacy, right? And navigating all these spaces. I did, a double take myself on something yesterday where I was like, I don't think that's Patrick Mahomes talking, right, in this video. And it wasn't Patrick
Yeah,
Mahomes talking in that
exactly.
video, because I said to myself, I don't think he would say that about one of his teammates. And it was a video that, once I like looked a little closer on my TikTok screen, his lips weren't moving with the
Yeah,
sound just right. And, as that technology becomes a little
exactly,
bit
exactly.
stronger, like, it's going to take a minute for someone to really process that, and if I had just heard the audio of it and didn't watch the video, I might have thought to myself, that's a weird thing, or that's a strange, like, and then I might not have fact checked it later on
Yeah.
and just put it in my back pocket of Super Bowl conversations for later this month, right? And so,
Right.
that's
Yeah.
something where there's a lot of boxes we can check by having those co-learning experiences. And, getting back to your original question, I think there's a level of transparency that's important, right? That this is a part of the process, not the product of work that we're submitting. And those are the kinds of pieces of language that I think we can bring into our conversations with both students and teachers.
Oh my gosh. I feel like we could talk for hours about AI.
Mhm.
Right? There's so much to cover. But if people wanted to like get in touch with you and get more information, obviously they could go to, is it
That's perfect. Yeah, you'll
classtechtips.com?
see an artificial
Okay.
intelligence resources button up there. And then my blog has a search bar on it. So if someone's interested in assessment, they're interested in creativity in the classroom, right, they can put in their keyword and stuff will pop right up for them.
And then do you do like any webinars or stuff that people would be able to attend or sign up? Like what they, if they just go to their website,
Yeah,
they'd be able
so
to
I
find all
have an
that?
events page on my website for places that are like conferences and things that are open to the public. But I do webinars all the time. I have one, and I'll give you the link that you're welcome to share with folks. It's classtechtips.com/24 tips. And it's a pre-recorded. I did it
Okay.
live, but the replay is up now, with 24 ways to use
Okay.
ChatGPT to kick off 2024. So I do those sort of things every once in a while, and I usually just include info in
Oh,
my newsletter. But I'll make sure to get you all the link for that, so that you can check it out.
oh,
Okay,
I would love to share that with
great.
everybody. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. I learned so much, and now I'm even more excited to go hop on all
Aw,
my
thank you
AI
so much for
things.
having me.